We're with Shaun McAlister, Executive Director of DFW NORML at the Suds and Buds Car Wash, trying to raise money for the October 17th DFW Marijuana March. Is that correct?
Dallas Marijuana March.
Dallas Marijuana March. Thank you very much. The reason I've asked Shaun to take a few moments to talk about the 2015 84th legislative session. Question I'd like to ask you, Shaun, what was different about the 84th legislative session that was different from past sessions that you've been to?
Well, this was actually the first legislative session that I've been actively participating as far as going to the Capitol and even getting the chance to testify and lead a team of people who were there to go and either testify or talk to their representatives. So for me, the two biggest things that seemed different from this session than the last session were, number one, we had a much larger number of people turning out to these hearings that were even going into late into the evening, 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, people who were packing these rooms, number one. And so all of a sudden we have far more people in the Capitol talking about cannabis and marijuana law reform in some capacity, either to their representatives or even to the state troopers in the hallway, or just generally buzzing in the hallways of the Capitol about marijuana. So there was a lot more of that. And I feel like that has a lot to do with a stronger grassroots base. And then number two, I think as a direct result of a lot of the noise making that various marijuana law reform groups have been creating over the last couple of years, we were able to see far more bills that were introduced this session than ever before. 11 or even 12 bills, depending on how you want to look at it, that were relevant to the marijuana consumer, or at least the marijuana law reformer. And so that's everything from civil asset forfeiture to being able to use whole plant medical marijuana. Finally, we had the biggest breakthrough in marijuana policy in Texas, which is our governing body acknowledges now that at least some part of the cannabis plant is a medicine for some people. And so that's huge. That's decades of us saying, of these people saying no to the facts and the science, and all of a sudden they're willing to acknowledge a small little bit of a concession. And here we go. Now we have a foot in the door, and now we can really, I think, make a meaningful change in this next legislative session, because it's no longer arguing whether or not marijuana is a medicine. Because we acknowledge that it is now. Our governor signed into law a bill that says that marijuana is a medicine for some people. So that's no longer even up for discussion or debate in this state. And that is huge for us. That gets us so much leverage to have so many other conversations, from industrialized hemp to a substance that is safer than alcohol and tobacco for responsible adults to consume safely away from children. And it just gives us this opportunity to have so many more conversations, so many more meaningful opportunities for reform, not just in the next legislative session, but starting now.
Yes, you're so correct. And I personally would like to thank you and the DFW NORML team for all the emphasis that y'all have put on medical cannabis and decriminalization, and your medical cannabis rally that we had at the park, the DFW NORML annual march in Dallas, or Fort Worth, I'm sorry. And DFW has done a lot to promote and keep this issue in front of folks here in Texas, to increase interest and voting participation and people calling their legislatures. It's been really helpful. What impacts on Texas politics and the cannabis reform movement did the successes in Alaska, Oregon, Washington, Colorado, and Washington, D.C. have on the 84th legislative session?
Cannabis legalization was no longer an abstract concept after that. It was a very real thing that has happened, that results were able to be being measured from the moment it occurred. And so from those moments, from the time that all four of those places, 5 if you're counting D.C., acknowledged this, all of a sudden people were paying attention, and it was kind of like a little stopwatch had clicked on. And people were now collecting data. Now they were watching, they were paying attention to all these different factors, these moving parts, how much money was going to be made, how much money was going to be saved, how many people were no longer going to go to jail, how was it going to impact the children, heaven forbid. And this data is coming in. It turns out the sky didn't fall. And it's actually been a pretty great thing for these various states. And so now Texas is able to look at these places and say, okay, this is places within our borders that have done this, and martial law did not occur. All hell did not break loose. I think this may be okay now. And so that was huge for Texas, because this state has been resting on its laurels for years, while the rest of the country and the world has developed sensible marijuana policy that is helping people right now. And so here we are at the very tail end of the race, coming in saying, okay, now we're acknowledging a few things. Now now we've been able to see what these other states have done. Now we can customize the approach for what we think is best for Texans.
That's correct. What lessons have we learned from the 84th legislative session that we can take over into the 85th in 2017 and make a greater impact? What are your thoughts on that?
Oh man, my personal thoughts on that. First and foremost, there's never going to be in my mind enough people who got involved and went down to the Capitol or made the phones ring. People are very quick to say that following a blog or sending an email is helping, and maybe it is, but showing up matters more than anything. And so what I think that we can take from this legislative session is the numbers don't lie. We had so many people show up throughout this session, throughout the time leading up to the session, what I've been jokingly referring to as the off-season, because Texans love their football, legislative off-season. So many people were still involved, talking to their reps, fostering these relationships, so that by the time session came around, we weren't looking for new allies. We were ready to be calling in the favors of the allies that we had been establishing for the years leading up to it. So this session, the proof is in the pudding. People showed up, people made the phone rings, people got involved, and the representatives heard it. They felt it, and people like Representative David Simpson came out of the blue with one of the most ballsy propositions for marijuana law reform this country has ever even considered. People are still sharing articles relevant to 2165, his bill to repeal prohibition, now, and messaging me on Facebook about it because they think it's still relevant. They don't understand. And so this man who is this conservative Christian came out of left field, and all of a sudden he's involved. What does that say for the next session? How many more people that aren't even on our radar potentially are going to come out and say, you know what, there's support to be found here, and I'm going to be somebody who is courageous enough to step up into the light, out of the cannabis closet, if you want to call it that, and ask for the support from these people who are politically active, who are active in their communities, doing things like car washes and picking up trash, people who are grassroots, they're political, and they care about this state and making it better through marijuana law reform.
That's very true. I'm amazed at, as I look upon this, I'm amazed at the different political spectrums and religious, every element of society is in this cannabis reform movement. I mean, it is truly a rainbow mixture of everything. And I think that is so positive, and it lends credence to the truth of what we're trying to say about decriminalization, medicalization, and legalization. I'm amazed at it, and I know that you are. What do you think? What are your thoughts about keep it going? As Stephen Benson says, well, 2015 was really great, but we have got to show up for 2017.
And we got to start doing that right now. We're not waiting until the year changes. We're getting involved right now, fostering relationships with people who are going to help be our champions when the times come to be getting those headlines, to be testifying in those hearings, and shaping policy for millions of people. Because what happens in Texas is going to have impacts way beyond our borders. The entire South will feel the reach of our sensible and compassionate marijuana law reform. And so what I hope people will take from this last session, and maybe even this video, is our work has just begun. And it's not going to be me, it's not going to be people like Jax Finkel or Heather Fazio, the ones who are on the headlines all the time, that ultimately make the difference. It's going to be you, the people who have been waiting for their opportunity to say, okay, I feel like my time is now. And that's now. That's this moment. That's not when the legislature meets again. That's not when some random thing happens in this world that automatically positions us for the perfect opportunity. It's now. We have to put in the legwork now. If we're going to make any sort of change, we need to consider this as important of a time as legislative session, because there's so much work to be done. regardless of whether or not you're talking to an actual lawmaker, you could still be talking to your doctor or your professor or people that you work with or people that you meet at the post office. You can wear your marijuana shirt. You can go to events and meet people in your area who are already assembling and finding a way to work together despite the laws being in a really sad state. And you can find a way to take ownership of your own freedom, which is what I've always encouraged here at DFW NORML, is show up, find a way to get involved, and then we'll figure out where to take it from there once everybody is together.
Thank you very much for your time, Shaun, and I know that I'll see you down there in 2017.
I'll be there.